Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by Living Waters Abide Ministries. With host and founder, Richard Case, and co-host and retreat leader, Kathy Ricconi. Today is our special guest day, where we will hear from a friend in the ministry who will share their insight and stories on truth in this chaotic world. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, welcome everybody. This is Guest Thursday, and we again have our part two of our special guest, Casey Mulligan, who is now a confirmed position in the White House, which I know that position was empty because of its nature, and you're special counsel to the Office of Small Business, and you operate for small business, but it's really not just legal advice. You're really trying to assist small businesses, which means you're doing research, et cetera. We talked last time about the fishermen and having it. And you mentioned that there's regulation, or not regulations, but bureaucracy that has crept in that has really, kind of stifled them. As you get to know that, what kind of things do you then now have to do to move to where that would be released and they could operate, let's say, back to the way it was intended to be originally?
Well, my office doesn't make any rules. So I have to, ultimately it's persuasion. I need to persuade. There's somebody with the authority to change the rule. Sometimes it may be Congress, often a particular cabinet member or people under them, and I need to persuade them. And sometimes depends on the issue. Sometimes, and I have a small office, so sometimes I'll say, in this issue, Administrator Zeldin, he's all over this already. And what I can do is use the testimony I got from the small businesses to support him, maybe help him go faster. So that happens a lot. And then I don't use a lot of my resources in that. Other times they may need convincing. It's not on their radar, just to show it to them. And then there's a communications exercise, and also our economics part helps. We try to talk about how much it costs. How many hundreds of millions do we spend on every whale in terms of fishing results that we're not getting. And it is in the hundreds of millions. So that, doing it that way, just some economic support. And some of these, I work with the speechwriters a lot in the first term and also in between. They were still his speechwriters down in Florida. So I work with them. Sometimes it's material the president would love to talk about. I mean, he's busy. He can't talk about everything, but there's some things that he really may enjoy talking about. And so the persuasion can come from the top, from him saying, we got to fix this. We love our farmers, our fishermen, our ranchers, and isn't it outrageous that the windmills do X or Y? And so it can go that way. I'm just getting started. I've only been here 3 months. The other angle, persuasion angle, comes just in sheer numbers. I mean, there's lots of small businesses, and they can make their voice heard. I can try to orchestrate that. So one of the early successes we had, again, you're probably experiencing it, the beneficial ownership interest requirement, some brand new paperwork. My business has been around for over 10 years. I didn't change anything in my business, but I got this new paperwork, cost me, I think, $3,000. And the small businesses really made their voice heard. My office was very early in pointing it out, to point out the problem, letting them know, alerting them. But ultimately it was through their groups and so on. They made such a noise that the Treasury Secretary very quickly in February largely reversed that. I already paid my $3,000 to my accountant and lawyer to handle it, but other businesses didn't have to make that expense because Secretary Besson fixed it.
Wow, that's cool. So it sounds like you have the opportunity, which is probably why you're the right person to, you can listen, synthesize, provide economic information through your ability to persuade with information that you could make a real big impact here on the behalf of small businesses, which I'm assuming they're loving to have you come and talk to them. And listen, and then go try to do something about it. So that'll be fun. We'll love to watch that over time of all the things you're able to do and the real difference you can make.
Well, there's that part of it. In the end of the day, it won't be in my metrics and things. I don't think you get these rules, really outrageous and truly unbelievable rules in place. that was from a long, long process of not listening to the people. And so certainly the first experiences I've had is like, wait a second, you're listening. And I try, as I'm synthesizing and trying to think, how am I going to persuade Secretary so-and-so? I'm trying to make their concern more articulate. And so I'll be telling them back what they told me in different terms. And they're like, oh, that guy, he heard me, he understands. He's saying it maybe better than I was saying it. And a lot of them just love that. Even if it goes nowhere. If it goes nowhere, fire me. It needs to go somewhere. It's a fun experience to have, to listen to people who haven't been listened to maybe ever, certainly in many years.
Yeah. How do you sort out, obviously as you're listening, you probably have a whole list already of all these different things. How do you sort them out of what your priorities are, now and then what'll be next? And I'm sure there's way more than you could even possibly get to. How do you sort that out?
What is a target-rich environment? Now, that's part of the beauty of economics. You can see apparently dissimilar. You may look at a dozen things. So many people look at it and say, well, it's a dozen unique things. They each need their own unique attention. But you realize, as an economist, no, they're all the same thing. The animals are running the place and the humans don't have dominion over more. That covers almost a dozen things right there that I've heard so far. And if that's a theme that I can sell, I'm handling 12 things at once in a sense.
Yeah.
At least on the persuasion side. So that there's that conceptual element. And I was doing that in the first term as well, recognizing the common thread. The dollar amount's important. We talked about the payroll forms. That's every single employer is dealing with that. There may be some other rule about a chemical or something that there are some small businesses deal with, but nowhere close to all of them. So that would be a priority. And where my office would make a difference, as I said, with some of these things, the train's already rolling and I can add a little fuel. But so far I've been focusing on things that if I don't bring it to Washington, it won't be heard. And unfortunately, it's a target-rich environment. There's a lot of stuff like that. It shouldn't be that way, but that's where we are.
Yeah. On the economic side, a couple questions is, are we either close to or possibly in a potential recession? And then two is, what do you see as the impact of the tariffs, which on the surface, to the average American looks like it's increasing prices, which is then inflation to them. And you're a big proponent of the marginal income concept. So how have you viewed all that right now in terms of, and what can our audience understand about what we think might be ahead for the next year or so?
The taxes are a burden. We've talked about that. There's a lot of different kind of taxes. And one of the things we had in the platform in Milwaukee, so that was for all Republicans, the ones on the Hill as well as the president's team. The president wrote a platform, but it overwhelmingly passed with all Republicans, was that we were going to lower taxes overall, and we were going to shift the mix. The president uses the phrases internal revenue and external revenue, less income, maybe payroll tax, and more levies on imports. That's a change in the mix. Change in the mix by itself doesn't do a whole lot for your aggregate numbers. Now, depending on where you sit, it makes a big difference. I mean, some businesses would love to have a high tariff and a low income tax, and others would love to have a low tariff and a high income tax if they have to make that choice. And it depends on the region and the industry and everything like that. So, but on the aggregate, the GDP counts all those folks. So in the aggregate, overwhelmingly what matters is how much tax you have, not how is it composed. Somehow the message of the platform got lost. I don't know if it's the fake news. I was not confirmed, so I wasn't participating in a lot of that stuff, so I don't quite understand how the message got lost. But that's our policy. It's not just the president, it's the Republicans on the Hill who want that. In fact, I think there are a number of Democrats who want that too. But the talking heads have made a big deal about it from the GDP perspective, and we've seen that play out. So earlier in the year, they were saying, recession, and because of the tariffs, and we haven't had that. And you could have predicted it. I did predict it. We're lowering the aggregate taxes, so that's not a recessionary thing. We're changing the mix. And so Rich mentioned, some prices are changing. That's what you expect. You change the mix of things. Some things will get more expensive, other things will get cheaper. So there's that part of it. I think really the bigger thing that people don't pay a lot of attention to on the GDP is the population of the United States. In that sense, the GDP might not be a very interesting number for people. You can think of the GDP as the GDP per person times the number of people. Now, would you like to be in a country with 20 trillion of GDP and a billion people, or 20 trillion with a half a billion people? That would be twice as much per person. And the numbers, the headline numbers you see are the total. And there's been a change. We don't really understand because there's so much illegal. There's been a huge change in the population over the past 6 years. And so you tend to got some GDP growth. We didn't have a lot in the previous 4 years, but you tend to got some just by increasing the number of people, even while you were driving down the incomes of the people who were already here.
Yeah.
And there's maybe some of the reverse of that. Again, it's a little bit hard to tell. Is our population going down? Is it just going up less quickly? The news, there's a lot of fake news around that. They'll show a few illegals getting rounded up and make it seem like this is a massive thing. I don't know. I'm not sure. Who knows what's happened to our population right now. It's not growing at the rate that it was 4 years ago because the border is secure. But how much is it growing? I don't know. And I'd love to know it for the purpose of predicting the aggregate GDP.
Yeah.
Now, from an individual point of view, who cares in that sense? What about your family's income on a per person basis, or your family's income? And that, I think the trends look very good.
Yeah. What do you, based on that, what you see, because you're looking at it in the aggregate, which I kind of appreciate that perspective, what do you see as likely over the next 12 months or so, 12, 18 months, based on what you see in right now?
I think the wages should be strong, and the family incomes, those sort of measures will grow at impressive rates. To know the aggregate GDP, which will get the headline, I need to know about the number of people, and I'm not sure what's going on with that.
Yeah.
If I were still in the CA, I would be worrying a lot more about that. It's a fascinating thing. Figuring out the number doesn't help my small businesses, so I'm not putting a lot of attention to it these days.
Right. As you look at the continued growth of the national debt, does that have any impact at all on what may happen down the road, or is it just you feel like business as usual with that?
Well, I think we've done something. One of the things, we don't have, the confirmations are going slow, so we don't have the posts filled in the government the way we're supposed to. And I've taken on a lot of that work, try to help out in the agencies that are thin. And so one of the things they asked me, Casey, can you help us understand the economics of the Genius Act? So the Genius Act is passed by Congress, signed by the president, about having crypto, a regulatory system for crypto, particularly what they call the stable coins. And anytime I get something like that, it came from Congress, it's probably going to be ugly. I'm going to cover most of my eyes when I look at it. And I looked at that and it's like, wow, this is impressive. I don't know. Congratulations, Congress. You don't do this very often. Pretty impressive rule. Companies will be allowed to create these stable coins backed by government securities. If people like these stable coins, I'm pretty sure they will. It's a new product, so it's hard to tell, which in itself is an issue. Like, the government doesn't do new things very often, so we know that our securities are outdated because it's government. But this is a new thing, and I think it's going to increase the demand for our government debt. Rich, you were mentioning the supply, which is very high supply of government debt. This is going to be a source of increased demand from Americans and probably foreigners as well. If these stable coins are something that people like, they will like them to some degree. They make some things easier to handle financially. There's also the kind of whole hobby end of it, which it can be amazing. People holding it just for fun. So I think it's a marketing advance for the sellers of our government debt. So I give Congress credit. Now, we need a year or two to see it play out. My part now is to help write the regulations around exactly how that's going to work, what kind of company can do it, what requirements do they need to do so that we don't have a financial problem from these new products.
Yeah. What will be the, right now, if somebody buys treasuries, they get, a interest rate paid to them. How will this work? For if I buy this, how will I get, how will my return be done? Will it be a fixed deal? Will it be a floating value?
Well, the stable coin it's supposed to be stable, so it's always supposed to be worth $1 or whatever, $100, whatever number it is, and it stays that way. The stable coins can't pay interest. I don't take that too literally. I mean, we're going to follow the law 1,000%. But Rich, maybe Kathy, you're not old enough, but Rich and I remember when banks couldn't pay interest, right? They paid it in other ways. They gave you other services, toasters. Can you believe we went to the bank to get a toaster, but that's what you did. So I suspect that the market will play out that way so that maybe there'll be a reward system like with credit cards. Those of us who pay our credit card balance on time, they don't pay us interest, right? They don't charge us interest, but they don't pay us interest, but we give rewards and things like that, which is a very popular thing, right? People, particularly the airline rewards, people love their... So I'll see it that way, that you'll maybe earn things in kind. The economics points that way. I'm not a finance person. I will not be a person designing or selling these products, but the economic forces seem to go in that direction.
Yeah. Will that be an adjunct to still buying treasuries, or will that become the way that things done?
Well, you'll be able to do it either way. Now the laws can change, and maybe they would change that, but it's a new product. Like when Coke had Diet Coke and regular Coke, and they come out with Cherry Coke, right? It's a third thing you can try. It's good for the brand. Some of the elements of the brand may lose out, but the total portfolio is going to be stronger.
Yeah. What would be, if that is developed, what will be the advantage to the buyer of doing that, let's say, versus a treasury? What would be the advantage of doing it that way?
I think trading it will be much easier, and not that trading's that hard now. Smaller denominations, treasuries come in some pretty big denominations, and the area where trading's hard now is cross-border. When we go to visit Israel or Italy or whatever, you know the complications with that, right? And it's a mess. And with these stable coins, it'll be like you hadn't even gone anywhere.
Will there therefore become a market for that in terms of if I buy it at a certain price, I might be able to sell it at a higher price in the trade?
Well, stable coins are not supposed to trade value, so you won't do it for the speculative side. Now the reward system, I don't know how they're going to work the reward system, and maybe the reward system in itself will be a fun game that people want to play. That would be up to the ingenuity of the market, but the coin itself, it'd be more like a money market fund or something like that. You're not going to be entertained or scared by its price changes.
Yeah, interesting. When you look at, remember, your premise has always been the taxes and the regulations. With what is going to happen between the composite of tariffs and taxes, do you feel over the next year that the gross tax burden will actually become less, and therefore more marginal income will come into the system in the next year or so?
There's no question that the tax burden is going down. Putting aside the regulatory burden, which is its own thing, very much like a tax, but it's not showing up in the treasury accounts. The tax burden is going down, maybe not to the degree that it did in 2017. Big part of what we did this year was avoid it going back to what it was in 2016. So we kind of avoided an increase, which is not a decrease by itself, but there is some decrease element as well. The much bigger part will be on the regulatory side. We're dealing with regulations. Some came about, plenty came about in the last 4 years, but there's plenty more that have been around way too long, like the fishing ones.
Yeah.
That problem's been around for 20 years, maybe since the 80s.
Yeah. Well, you're going to have no lack of things to do. That's for sure. And it sounds, Kathy and I can, we can just understand that, for such a time as this for you, is that, you're the right guy at the right time for this particular thing. And it'll be fun to watch it. We'll have you back on and catch up, another maybe 2 or 3 months and just say, okay, what happened? What's happening and how are you succeeding in your, since you can't make the rule, you have to persuade others to adopt rules. And that's going to be an interesting challenge, of how it is. Sounds like there's receptivity to it, so that you must be feeling positive about that.
I'm not counting my chickens, but I'm not dejected at this point. It's exciting.
We so appreciate you, and it's just a pleasure to know that somebody like you is in that position and making an impact because of the way you look at things. And we just pray that we're going to pray for you and say hi to Julia for us. And we look forward love to catch up with her. And I'm sure she's having fun with raising girls right now. And
there's drama, Rich.
There's they're all in the same place.
You know how it goes.
Heavenly Father, we lift up Casey and thank you for his openness, his ability just has this wonderful ability to take complex things and make them understandable. And we so appreciate that. We just pray for favor as he listens, and then he presents positive opportunity for these agencies and for the Congress to set things right and to simplify it all. And so we just pray that that'll be true for him. He'll enjoy every minute of it. Pray for he and his wife, Julia, and their kids, that they'll continue to enjoy each other, and that we look forward to all that you're about ready to do. And thank you for where he is. And we praise you and thank you now in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Well, thanks so much for joining us, Casey. And I also just want to highlight an extra gratitude for you. I think sometimes, maybe this is just me, but I think it's more than just me. We can get where we complain about the government and the pace that things go and what's really going on, and forget the faces behind who's working, and that, you're there at a sacrifice, and what you're doing, what you're working to speak up for small businesses and to listen to what's going on and create real change. We appreciate that. And we value the fact that you are sacrificing time from your family, from your job, from the students at the university. Your service comes with sacrifice. So I'm just appreciating that from you in the moment, and just wanted to say thanks again. And thanks for joining us. And listeners, if you have questions, send them in to us at Abide Ministries, questions@abideministries.com. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Yep. See you then.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by Living Waters Abide Ministries. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.